It's official. The confirmation is now in. Enzo Maresca has left Chelsea with immediate effect, as both the club and the manager have agreed to go their separate ways. Over the past 24 hours, it was clear the situation between Maresca and Chelsea had become extremely tense and difficult. Chelsea have now pulled the trigger. The club has officially confirmed that they have parted company with Enzo Maresca. In a statement, Chelsea Football Club announced that they and head coach Enzo Maresca have mutually agreed to part ways. During his time at the club, Enzo guided the team to success in both the UEFA Conference League and the FIFA Club World Cup. Those achievements will remain an important chapter in the club's recent history, and Chelsea thanked him for his contribution. Just 18 months into a reign that delivered silverware, including the Conference League and the Club World Cup, the split still feels dramatic. For weeks, the fan base sounded like three different clubs arguing within the same timeline. One side couldn't wait for it to be over, openly celebrating the idea of Maresca leaving Chelsea for good. Another side pointed the finger higher up the chain, arguing that sacking Maresca mid-season only proved Chelsea's billionaire owners treated managers as disposable toys. And then there were the realists, caught in the middle. For them, sacking Enzo now felt reckless. Give him the rest of the season, they argued, but with clear objectives. That was the mood. That was the divide. And then December arrived once again. Chelsea's season collapsed into the exact kind of winter spiral that turns doubt into panic. One win in 7 league games, points dropped from winning positions, a growing sense that the team never looked the same twice, a defense constantly reshuffled, a starting lineup changing almost every week, a project that suddenly felt like it was being rebuilt in the middle of matches. Then came the quote that shifted everything. Maresca admitted the previous 48 hours had been the worst he had experienced at Chelsea, hinting that many people around the club didn't support the team, before refusing to explain what he meant. And after the draw with Bournemouth, had a moment when clarity was needed most, Maresca didn't even face the cameras. But here's the twist. This conflict didn't stay online. It didn't remain confined to the stands. It ended today. The question is no longer whether Chelsea should sack him. That decision has already been made. The real question is how a trophy-winning project collapsed so quickly, and what that says about who truly holds power at Chelsea. When Chelsea appointed Enzo Maresca in the summer of 2024, it wasn't because everything had fallen apart. It was because they wanted something different. Chelsea had just finished 6th under Mauricio Pochettino. On paper, that looked like progress. European football had returned. The team ended the season strongly. The defense had tightened. Young players were beginning to look like they belonged. By most standards, Pochettino had earned another year. But Chelsea stopped being normal a long time ago. The board saw things differently. To them, 6th place wasn't enough, not because of the position itself, but because of how it was achieved. They wanted more than results. They wanted control. Not just winning matches, but owning them, dominating possession, dictating tempo, forcing opponents to play Chelsea's game. They wanted positional clarity, especially in build-up and midfield occupation. Above all, they wanted a system that could function without superstars, a structure centered on young, valuable players who could be developed and sold if necessary, a machine that didn't collapse when one piece was missing. So, despite the European qualification and late-season momentum, Pochettino was dismissed. Chelsea searched for someone who embodied an entirely different vision. That man was Enzo Maresca. Maresca wasn't hired to put out fires. He was hired to redesign the entire building. Having worked under Pep Guardiola, he understood positional play. He believed in patterns over moments, systems over individuals. He represented everything Chelsea's owners believed they lacked: emotional control, repeatability over brilliance. The brief was simple but ambitious. Build a team that could dominate possession without becoming blunt in attack. Make Chelsea consistent through rehearsed patterns, not individual magic. Develop young players within a framework that wouldn't collapse when injuries or loss of form hit. This wasn't about fixing holes. It was about rebuilding Chelsea's football identity from the ground up. And in his first season, Maresca delivered. Chelsea finished 4th in the Premier League in 2024. Champions League football returned for the first time since 2022-23. They ended the season with 69 points, 20 wins, 9 draws, 9 defeats, and a plus 21 goal difference. Those numbers might not shock you, but context matters. This was a squad recovering from ownership chaos, constant churn, and one of the youngest lineups in the league. That top 4 finish felt like order emerging from years of noise. The league was only part of the story. On May 28, 2025, Chelsea won the UEFA Conference League, beating Real Betis 4-1 in the final. The match became a perfect snapshot of Maresca's vision. Chelsea conceded early. They didn't panic. They adjusted, then took control. Enzo Fernandez, Nicolas Jackson, Jadon Sancho, and Moises Caicedo all scored. By full time, it wasn't close. That victory made Chelsea the first club ever to win all 4 major UEFA trophies. It wasn't just progress, it was proof, validation that the project was real. Then came summer, and belief peaked. In July 2025, Chelsea lifted the FIFA Club World Cup. They didn't just beat Paris Saint-Germain in the final, they dismantled them 3-0. Cole Palmer scored twice and assisted another in a devastating first-half masterclass. By halftime, the contest was over. Palmer won the Golden Ball. Robert Sanchez claimed the Golden Glove. By the start of the 2025-26 season, Maresca's Chelsea resume looked unreal. Top 4, European silverware, a world title, which is exactly why today's sacking feels so surreal. Chelsea didn't dismiss a manager who failed. They dismissed one who succeeded and still couldn't survive. But success changed the rules. After finishing top 4 and winning 2 trophies, Chelsea were no longer judged as a project. They were judged as contenders. That's when the pressure intensified. The season began well enough. There were flashes of brilliance, big away wins, heavy rotation in Europe that still delivered dominant results. The system looked strong enough to carry the team regardless of personnel. Through November, Chelsea were close enough to the top that calling it a crisis felt premature, but underneath, cracks were forming. Rotation became relentless. Defensive partnerships never settled. Some games were comfortable, others only partially controlled. The ceiling was high, but the floor felt fragile. By November, Chelsea existed in 2 realities at once, proof that Maresca's system could dismantle elite opponents, alongside a growing fear that the margin for error was shrinking fast. And that's where this chapter pauses, because everything that followed, the December collapse, internal tension, cryptic press conferences, and ultimately today's decision, only makes sense if you remember one thing. Enzo Maresca wasn't hired just to survive at Chelsea. He was hired to transform it. And for a time, he truly did. What comes next explains why it still wasn't enough. Chelsea fans even have a name for it, the December curse. Online, it sounds like a joke, something supporters half laugh about when the fixtures stack up. But under Maresca, December stopped feeling like bad luck. It started to feel like a diagnosis. December doesn't create problems, it exposes them. When matches pile up, legs are tired, and training time disappears, every weakness surfaces. Well-drilled patterns blur. Rotation becomes necessity. Games stop being choreographed and become survival. That's when you learn what a team really is. For Maresca's Chelsea, the truth was painful, and it wasn't new. Back in December 2024, during his first season, Chelsea entered the festive period flying. 6 straight wins in all competitions. Then the wheels came off. 5 Premier League matches without a single win. The only real relief came from an FA Cup tie against Morecambe. That winter spell didn't kill the project, but it sent out a clear warning. It showed that this Chelsea side, so carefully structured, so reliant on rhythm and repetition, could quickly become fragile the moment chaos entered the picture. 12 months later, that warning turned into a complete collapse. By the end of December 2025, Chelsea had managed just 1 league win from 7 games. 1 out of 7. And this wasn't a team fighting relegation. This wasn't an injury-ravaged squad barely holding together. This was a side that only weeks earlier had been discussed as genuine title contenders, now visibly coming apart. And it wasn't even about being outplayed. It was worse. They were losing control. If there's one statistic that explains why December became fatal, it's this. Chelsea dropped 15 points from winning positions. 15. That's not variance. That's not bad luck. That's not fine margins. That's a breakdown in game management repeated so often it became part of the team's identity. Chelsea could start games strongly. They could create chances. They could take the lead, but they couldn't hold it. They couldn't manage transitions after scoring. They couldn't slow games down when required. They couldn't protect advantages when it mattered most. And December is ruthless toward teams that can't do those things. What made it even more frustrating was that the numbers suggested Chelsea weren't broken at all. After 19 league matches, the attacking data still looked strong. 32 goals scored, 21 conceded, an expected goals total of 33.01, almost perfect
perfectly aligned with their output. They'd taken 184 shots, hit the target 92 times, recorded 543 touches inside the opposition box, and struck the woodwork 7 times. This wasn't a side struggling to create. This wasn't a dysfunctional attack. But then you looked at the other side of the ledger. 4 red cards, 41 yellow cards, 221 fouls committed. Discipline matters in December. Winter football is decided by moments, reckless fouls, emotional reactions, tired transitions. When mental control slips, games turn fast. Chelsea weren't failing to play football. They were failing to finish games.
And the reason Maresca's system struggled so badly in winter came down to what it demanded. His football relies on precision, exact spacing between lines, rehearsed build-up angles, coordinated pressing triggers, partnerships built through repetition. When it works, it's devastating. But December strips away the conditions that allow precision to survive. Rotation increases, training becomes recovery, familiar partnerships are broken apart, and once precision drops even slightly, Maresca's system has no safety net. It becomes exposed. Pressing arrives a second too late. Distances stretch. The back line is forced to defend larger spaces. Matches that should have been controlled become chaotic. Chelsea didn't forget how to play. They lost the layer of control that made everything function. Then came the moment that turned poor form into a full-blown crisis. Ironically, it followed Chelsea's only league win during that 7-game run, a 2-0 victory over Everton. Instead of settling the noise, Maresca escalated it. He admitted publicly that the previous 48 hours had been the worst he'd experienced since arriving at Chelsea. Then came the line that set off alarm bells. Many people didn't support me and the team. That wasn't normal manager talk. That wasn't about tactics or formations. That was about trust, about backing. And when journalists pressed him to clarify, was it the board, the hierarchy, the fans? He refused to explain. That refusal mattered more than most people realized, because once a manager hints at internal division and won't clarify, the conversation shifts. It stops being about results and becomes about power, alignment, and who truly controls the club. And at Chelsea, that's always dangerous territory. If one match summed up the entire December collapse, it was Chelsea 2-2 Bournemouth. Chelsea took the lead, they looked comfortable, and then, once again, they let it slip. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't shocking, it was familiar. That draw didn't just drop 2 points, it confirmed what many had begun to fear. This wasn't a temporary dip. It was a pattern, the same story repeating itself. By then, fans weren't asking, will this turn around? They were asking, what is fundamentally broken here? And that's when form turned into politics. By the end of December, Chelsea weren't just struggling on the pitch. Every moment had become evidence in a wider case people were building. The dropped leads, the discipline problems, the endless rotation that never settled, the cryptic comments about internal tension. December didn't just test players' legs, it tested trust. Between the manager and the club, between the manager and the supporters, between the manager and the hierarchy above him. And once trust begins to crack, results stop being the only metric that matters. That's why December didn't just damage Maresca's Chelsea, it ended it. Because by the time January arrived, the discussion wasn't about recovery anymore. It was about whether the project even existed at all. And as we now know, it didn't. By the time Chelsea walked off the pitch against Bournemouth, the December curse had already taken hold. But what followed that 2-2 draw pushed the situation from bad form into something far more dangerous. This time, the collapse wasn't just tactical, it was symbolic. Chelsea were expected to do what clubs normally do in moments like this: explain, reflect, calm the noise, and move forward. Instead, Enzo Maresca didn't appear. No post-match press conference, no face in front of the cameras, no immediate explanation. Assistant coach Willy Caballero stepped in, with the club officially citing illness. He didn't feel well in the last 2 days. He had a bit of a temperature. On paper, that explanation was reasonable, but football doesn't exist on paper. It exists in context, and the context couldn't have been worse. Chelsea were deep into a poor run. The fan base was restless. Reports of tension between Maresca and the board were already circulating, and just days earlier, Maresca himself had publicly suggested that many people didn't support the team. In that environment, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels heavy. When a manager skips skips media duties in calm moments, it passes unnoticed. When it happens in the middle of a storm, it feels like a statement, intended or not. The Bournemouth draw made that storm impossible to ignore, because it didn't just hurt the league table, it exposed a club losing control of its narrative. That same match produced another flashpoint that revealed the mood inside Stamford Bridge. Cole Palmer, Chelsea's most productive attacker and creative heartbeat, was substituted. The reaction was immediate. Boos, chants, frustration directed straight at the dugout. That matters. Palmer isn't just another player. He's the one fans instinctively trust to rescue games when control slips. So when the crowd reacts like that to his substitution, it signals something deeper. This wasn't just anger over a result. It was anger over direction. In the space of 90 minutes, Chelsea suddenly had 3 fires burning at once. Results were slipping. Leads were being thrown away. Fans were openly turning on decisions. Internal tension was surfacing, and the manager had vanished from the public conversation. That combination doesn't just create pressure, it creates instability. This is where the debate around Maresca shifted from emotion to football substance. Rotation. From the moment he arrived, rotation was part of the plan. Chelsea have one of the youngest squads in the league, congested schedules, and a calendar that punishes physical mismanagement. In theory, rotation made sense, but scale changes everything. By this stage of the season, Maresca had made 119 changes to his starting lineups across 23 matches. That isn't marginal rotation, that's systemic upheaval. Even if you defend rotation philosophically, the consequences on the pitch are unavoidable. Chemistry struggles to develop because partnerships rarely repeat. Automatisms break down because timing relies on familiarity. Defensive relationships reset every week, increasing small but costly errors. Leadership becomes blurred because the hierarchy on the pitch keeps shifting. This isn't about one controversial team selection. It's about rhythm. And too often, Chelsea simply didn't look like a side playing with any real rhythm. Nowhere was that clearer than in defense. Chelsea's backline changed constantly. Different center-back pairings, different fullback profiles, different build-up angles from match to match. In a system that depends on precision and spacing, that lack of continuity comes at a heavy cost. And this is where fan frustration reached its peak, because it wasn't just that players were being rotated, it was which players were rotated. When fit, Wesley Fofana offered exactly what Chelsea lacked during that winter run: pace, physicality, recovery speed, and defensive authority. Joshua Champong and Benoit Badiashile, meanwhile, brought energy and reliability that supporters immediately connected with. Yet both we used inconsistently, rotated in and out even as Chelsea's biggest weakness became protecting leads. So the question fans kept asking was simple: why rotate stability when instability is your biggest problem? And it didn't stop at the back. In attack, Estevan, one of Chelsea's most dangerous individual threats, remained underused at moments when the team clearly needed unpredictability and spark. When games were slipping away, supporters looked to the bench and saw a potential solution left unused. At that point, rotation stopped being an abstract tactical debate. It became personal. Names, faces, decisions that felt increasingly hard to justify as points continued to disappear week after week. This is where the Maresca debate became genuinely complex and genuinely fair, because there were always 2 possible explanations for what we were seeing. Option 1, Maresca was choosing this. He believed heavy rotation was essential to maintain intensity, protect a young squad, and keep the system functioning across multiple competitions. Option 2, Maresca felt forced into it. Squad management pressures, availability issues, and internal dynamics may have been driving constant change, even when it damaged cohesion. Reports around Chelsea suggested growing tension over autonomy and influence, raising serious questions about how much freedom the head coach truly had within the club's structure. If that's true, then what fans perceived as confusion might have been something very different: a coach trying to impose a long-term system inside a club that still held the reins tightly, while results demanded immediate solutions. That is not a stable environment for any manager. This stretch, the Bournemouth draw, the absence from the press conference, the boos at Palmer's substitution, the chaos of rotation, is where Chelsea's situation stopped being about fixtures and became about identity. Who is really steering the club? Who sets the priorities? And when things start to wobble, who ultimately absorbs the pressure? Because at that point, Chelsea no longer looked like a club
club unified behind a single project. They looked like an organization pulling in different directions between the dugout, the boardroom, and the stands. And once silence enters the story, speculation takes control. What happened next wasn't sudden. It was the conclusion of a process that had already been unfolding. By the time Chelsea made their decision, the trust had already eroded. January simply delivered the verdict. Chelsea have now ended Enzo Maresca's reign, closing the chapter on a project that promised long-term control, delivered trophies, and still collapsed under internal strain. And that's the warning sign. This wasn't a manager removed after failure. It was a manager removed after success. When alignment breaks down in football, results can sometimes quiet the noise, but once politics step onto the pitch, results stop being enough. Now the focus shifts forward. The next appointment will reveal everything about Chelsea's future, whether this club is ready to commit to a clear plan or destined to keep starting over. What comes next won't just shape this season, it will define what Chelsea are for years to come.